Welcome to the Reclaim Leader podcast. I'm Jason Tucker.
And I'm Jesse Skiffington.
We're two pastors in the trenches who are passionate about church health for greater gospel impact.
We share the ups and downs of ministry, strategies that worked for us,
and some that didn't.
Best practices and practical tools for church leadership.
The goal, to help all of our churches flourish. Let's get started. See another sunrise, sing a little song. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Reclaim Leader podcast. Jason and Jesse back at you again. And listen, we're recording this, a little secret. Sometimes we get ahead, which is nice. We feel really proud of ourselves, but right. We're recording this. It's going to be a few weeks until this one comes out, but we're recording this right on the heels of Easter. So we've got Easter on the brain. And just thinking about, I'm sure pastors, you had a great Easter. It's always fun when you see people again, and the church is filled more than it usually is, and it's a feel good all around. It's wonderful because you're just really just preaching the gospel, preaching the resurrection, and people are expecting to hear it and excited to hear it. And there's an electricity about it that is just amazing. And one of the things is we always get guests. Every church sort of gets guests, and the big question that I always get asked, this always get asked by elders, by folks forever and ever, amen. They always ask, how do we get them to come back? Right? They came once. And I was just reading recently that Rick Warren, back in the day, he would now take it for what it is. I don't know how healthy this is to be so focused on numbers, but clearly it worked. He had goals that he would set for his church based on Easter morning. So he would say, okay, we had so many on Easter morning. That's our attendance, our weekly attendance goal next year. Wow. And his thinking was, if we could bring them in one day, then how can we get them to come? We should be able to bring them every week. So it was interesting, right? And that's how they would kind of set their metrics.
Man, that's a tough bar to hit.
It really is. Wow. It really is. But I do think the important thing to ask is, okay, some people are visiting from out of town. They just don't live around here. They're not going to come every week.
Yeah.
But some do, or there's sometimes a ripple effect. Somebody has a good experience and they tell their friend who does live locally.
That's right.
And I think one of the things that's important to consider is, what are the reasons that guests return? Why? It's been a long time since I've been a guest in a church, Jesse. I was trying to think of the last time I was church shopping. It had to be in college because I've just been doing ministry the whole time. So I've kind of not had any other job. So it's like I've always had a church family. So I remember what that was like, and trying to find the right fit, which sounds so consumeristic. It just is what it is. You're trying to find your people. You're trying to find a place where you feel like you can.
Well, I think we would agree there's probably healthier and less healthy versions of looking for a church, right? If you're new to a community, or you're trying to find or something's happened. We just had a local church that closed after, 20 years as a church plant, and just couldn't quite finally get there, and pandemic really had an impact. And so it's not there anymore. So those people are now looking for a new community to belong to. So it's not a bad thing necessarily for, but it can be weird if it is a consumer kind of mindset. It's not super great.
Yeah.
So how do we get those guests to come, but also to come back? And I think maybe it was the North Point folks that said their biggest win was if someone came to church and they came back the next week and brought a friend. Like, that was evidence that they were on the right track with something. And I'm like, man,
I feel like that's an even higher bar.
Even higher bar than the Easter bar, the Rick Warren bar, even. Yeah. And so, we just had, I was telling you before we hit record about this. I told a dad joke in the Easter sermon that hit in one service and everybody laughed. In the second service, it was crickets. And it was just one of those moments where you're like, well, all right, let's just keep moving then. And everybody then laughed at that, right? But this guy came up after the service and was like, hey, I just want you to know, I really liked your dad joke, and just appreciated things today. And they were kind of new. And so what can help them to come back, Jason? How
old do you feel when someone says, I liked your dad joke?
I love it. That happened to you recently too. I think this is I
never felt older, Jesse.
We have arrived.
Except for the day I had to put these dumb readers on that I can't live without.
We've arrived in life, that we get to tell dad jokes. And we're not so worried about our reputations or status anymore that we can't just have fun and tell a dad joke. So
I had a lot of driving during Holy Week of picking up my daughter from school and back and forth. And it was, I was listening to a bunch of podcasts, just like, and really all like entertainment sort of podcasts. And one of them said about when you hit your 50s, you're the youngest old people. So like, it's great. You're the youngest old people. You're still, you're still active. You do all the things, but you're in the old people category. And I've had to really watch my movie references because, man, are they dated? I tell you, man, I gotta work younger, man. That's a whole nother podcast.
The 90s are getting further and further in the rearview mirror, man.
It's crazy. Okay. Anyway, back to the topic. We're framing this as the top 10 reasons guests return to your church. Now, certainly there are others. These aren't really ranked. I really just thinking about 10 things. Some of these ideas came from some research. Our friend Dan Ryland, friend of the podcast, I love his wisdom and insight. And he was so cool about it. I read the blog post and reached out to him. And he's like, you don't got to credit me. Just talk about it. Just say research it. And I'm sorry, I can't help it.
Here's a pro tip for anybody listening. You should probably turn us off and go listen or read Dan's stuff.
He is so good. He just has so much leadership wisdom. And I just so appreciate his heart to serve. So danriley.com. I know I didn't have to do it, but I just want to send you that way. Okay. So here are some things, not in any particular order, that I think are really important things to think about. The first is that the reason a guest returns is they feel the presence of God. Mm-hmm. That is by far the thing that drives people the most. So I would say number one is a true number one. Mm. It's the presence of God is felt. Mm-hmm. And I am going to quote Dan here. I won't do it too much, Dan. But he says, when there is an unmistakable awareness of the presence and power of God at work, people are drawn in. Yeah. They are hungry and want more. And Jesse, we've been talking about this for months, but it just feels like this is the season that we're in right now. Mm-hmm. People are feeling the presence of God in their lives. I just had a conversation yesterday with a guy. He started coming in the last year. He's in his early 40s, never been baptized. He said, I think it's time. He said, I think it's time to get off the fence. I believe in Jesus Christ. And what do I do? And I'm like, yes, awesome. These are conversations we long for. I mean, this is why we went to seminary, to have conversations like this one day. And, so many other stories of, I had a mom of a high schooler is like, my high schooler said they want to go into ministry and I don't know what to do. Like, well, let's talk about it. It's been really neat. I know you, again, right before we hit record, you were talking about this season where you feel like people are just leaning in with God. They're feeling the presence of God.
Yeah, it really is true. And it's almost like there's a spiritual openness. I mean, there's a lot of themes we've been kind of picking at recently, but really an openness in the midst of the uncertainty and unsettledness of the world. When the world fails us and people look around, where can I build my life? And when you get to experience God and God's presence, even if you're not sure what that means yet or what you're going to do with that, man, it's a compelling thing. And so, that's, how do we create that environment and trust that God will show up and be at work and try to cultivate that environment for those things to happen.
And I know we have 10 things, we don't take too long, but can we just let's just linger on this a little bit longer. Yeah. How do you create an environment? And this is probably overlap with a lot of the other things we're going to say, but how do we create a situation where we can maximize the opportunity for people to hear God or to feel God's presence, right? Mm-hmm. I think it certainly has to do with setting the table as far as what we do on Sunday mornings, but I think it's something else. I think it's setting the expectation that God is there. Yeah. Because I think a natural default for somebody who is maybe de-churched or coming back to church or trying church for the first time isn't that I go to church and that's where God shows up. It's I go to church to sort of be inspired to see where God's showing up in my life. Mm-hmm. Both are important, but I don't know if the expectation is I go to church and I'm going to meet God there. God's going to speak to me. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think there's some things we can do to acknowledge God's presence and the Spirit's presence moving and working in our midst. And and that we're here to experience that and to be transformed by that presence. And even the way we pray, maybe ahead of our sermon. Lord, thank you that you are here. Would you speak to us? Help us to hear from you what we need to hear. Thank you that you know about our real lives, and and creating a space for people just to acknowledge that God is present. And sometimes even at the end of the sermon, I'll just create space. I know you kind of do some of these things too, where just for some quiet reflection and whatever you need to talk about with the Lord this morning, based on what we talked about in the message time in God's word. God is here. God is listening. Take some time to share what's going on in your heart with him. And so kind of creating that expectation that God is present. And when his people get together, he's present with us. And so, I there's a lot more we could say about the ways that we want to come alongside God in that and create those environments and how we would go about that. But this is crucial.
Yeah. And I think sort of like how you explained it is, you set that expectation as you move from one thing to the next. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like how some of the best times with my kids, I get to talk to them, are in the car. We're on our way somewhere. Yeah. It's not the thing. It's on the way to the thing. And I feel like in worship, something similar happens. Mm-hmm. On the way to the thing, we talk about the presence of God or how God's going to meet us in that thing. Mm-hmm. And whatever, I don't know exactly what that means, but I just think that's the kind of lane we're talking about, with setting an expectation of God's presence.
Good stuff.
All right. Second is they feel at home. Mm-hmm. They feel at home. I mean, we've all had a situation where you've been invited somewhere and you go and it couldn't be any more awkward. Maybe there's plastic on the furniture and you're afraid to sit down, or, it's just not the most welcoming. You just don't feel at home. You don't feel like you could be yourself. You're not really comfortable. You never take your jacket off.
Yeah.
Right. So what does it look like for a church experience where they feel at home, they feel comfortable? It's about physical and spiritual comfort and safety.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do I feel safe being myself as much as I will be on the first time I'm there? Right. But are these my people? Mm-hmm. And that's why people look at the church online first, is they want to see, are these my people? Mm-hmm. Right, wrong, whatever. Are these my people? And we talk a lot about hospitality and making sure that we are doing a good job of welcoming people, not just through our words and actions, but through our environment. So making sure that we're creating hospitable, friendly, welcoming environments. Yep. And it's funny how the little things interfere with that. I walked into back then it was our church parlor. We renovated it. We called it something else. Some of the older folks still call it the parlor.
Yeah.
But
I still call it the parlor. And anytime I'm coming to Tower Hill, I'm going to call it the parlor.
And I walked into the parlor one day, and there had to be 25 Kleenex boxes, all with like this floral print on it, like scattered around the room. And I'm like, what in the world is going on? There's weeping and gnashing of teeth. Like, what? I don't know. What and why the floral print? It looked like something in a funeral parlor, and I'm this is setting the wrong vibe. First of all, can we declutter? Maybe leave 2 boxes and put the rest on a shelf and close the cabinet. It's just so funny though how little things like that can matter with your sense of feeling at home or comfortable. I don't know. Have you experienced that?
I think that's right on. Little things matter. Little things are more noticed by people who are new than people who've been around, because most people probably that have been around Tower Hill probably walked past all those boxes and didn't even think about it. But a new guest is like, or whatever. Who knows what they're thinking, right? But I also think with that sort of hospitality or a sense of home, just even the small ways that we use language. We're so glad you're here. Welcome. Hope that you feel right at home here. Make yourselves at home. Be our guest. That kind of language is welcoming, hospitable language. And we were actually just having a conversation about environment and talking about, some people were saying, well, what if we had the sanctuary be a quiet place at the, as people gather, where people can come early and spend time in reflection and prayer before the service starts. And I'm thinking of a home that you're welcomed into, and they're thinking of a sanctuary that they're coming to escape the world. And I'm like, well, here's why we have music playing in the background as people gather. And here's why I love the vibrancy of people saying hi and talking to each other and shaking hands and giving hugs before the service begins, because it creates a sense of home and expectation. And not, I'm not saying that's right or wrong. It might be a preference thing, but for us, that warmth at the beginning gives a sense of home, I think.
Yeah. And then this is kind of a segue to the third one. Third reason that guests return: someone noticed them, but
right.
didn't smother them. Man, is that a balance?
That is the trick, isn't it?
It is a balance. So churches, if you're out there saying, okay, guests, stand up, we want to get to know you, I'm just telling you, a lot of people hate that. I love the heart behind that, but man, just give that another think through about just making sure that you're not smothering them. I told a story recently about how I went to a church. I was in college. That was back when I was looking for a church at college, and I was asked to lead their VBS.
No, the first Sunday you were there. Of course you were. That's fantastic, Jason. You would be really good at it, which is probably why they asked.
Dude, I ran out of that place.
I bet you did.
Like, what in the world?
So appropriate noticing. We're glad you're here. Hi, welcome. Oh, how can I help you? If you need to know where the restrooms are or whatever the things are, right? But doing it in a way that is balances that well is crucially important. When I first started at Marine View, we had this thing called the friendship pad, which was an attendance
we all had that thing
sheet, right? And you would put, your name and I'm a member, and we check the boxes or whatever, and it would go down the row. And new guests, the idea was then if there's a guest in your row, you'll get to know their name and blah, blah, blah. But we found it was actually really off-putting for people who just wanted to show up and kind of be anonymous and check things out. It wasn't creating that sense of warm welcome. It was almost like, what are they going to do with this information? I'm not sure if I'm interested yet. So I think it's really spot on. How do you welcome but not over welcome? How do you create hospitality without smothering? And it probably is a little bit of a judgment call for each person that's coming in.
For sure. And the way that we handle it is we try to just give them the power dynamic in that. Like, we're just not going to, we will greet you, be like, oh, hey, I haven't met you yet. And usually they'll say, oh yeah, it's our first Sunday. Great. You have any questions? And if you don't, maybe think a question later, just go see Suzanne at the guest services table or something. So we put it on them to take a step if they want to know more. And then in the service, and again, we talk about this all the time, but in the service, we'll say something like, if you're a guest with us today, very special welcome to you. We pray that you feel as welcome as you are, and then move on. And just as a way of acknowledging, we're glad you're in the room. And if you want to know more about this place, come find us. In fact, that's part of the welcome. So Suzanne or whoever's doing the welcome that day will say, find somebody with a green lanyard. You get to know more about this place, Tower Hill.
Kind of welcome them, put the ball back in their court, but we're still noticing them, all that kind of stuff. Really good.
Yeah. Okay, number 4. This was straight from Dan Rylands. This was a great one. So some of them I tweaked or changed or whatever, but this one was right from him because he just said it perfectly. The worship service is encouraging, relevant, biblically sound, grounded in prayer, and executed with heart and excellence.
Wow.
Yes. That's why people come back. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to try to compete with the churches down the street.
Yep.
But what does that look like for you? And in fact, I'd encourage you not to try to compete with churches down the street. You're your own thing.
And do that.
Yeah. Be yourself and do that. Make sure that it is. Now, I have a heart for this, but I feel like it should be winsome and it should connect with people in their everyday life and yet maintain a high view of Scripture and a high centrality of Scripture.
Right.
And that you should be praying for your sermon to land, that you should be praying for your, as a church. And then make sure you pay attention to the execution. Like, make sure it's done as good as it can be. And we have, again, our Tuesday meetings we'll always do a little post-mortem or, just do a little checkup on how did it go? What are some things there's things every week that could be better. And it's just kind of the nature of it. But all that stuff matters. And honestly, that creates a quality of an experience that opens people up to God's presence.
Yeah. And I would say has a lot to do with our planning and preparation and having a rhythm for all that and making sure that we're bringing our best. And after you've been preaching for a number of years, you're like, are you as sharp as you once were, or are you continuing to develop that and to continue to lean in? So for me, if I have a really good planning process and a creative process with our team and a debriefing, then we can keep that edge a little bit, and we can do it in our way. Marine View's way is different than Tower Hill's way, and Tower Hill's way is different than the church down the road, et cetera. But to be doing that and doing it within kind of who God made you to be as a congregation, I think is essential.
Yeah. All right, number 5. I'm just seeing we're like almost 20 minutes in.
Let's do it. Let's crank.
Okay. The volunteers in the congregation display authentic friendship and fun. Truly.
You mean they like each other?
Yeah.
The church likes each other.
How contagious that is.
Yeah. No, it's so true. If people see people having fun with each other, you're like, oh, that seems fun too. We should be a part of that. We had a breakfast a while back. Kids were out playing. I was flipping pancakes. People were having fun. It's not the most spiritual thing we've ever done, but it was fun, and new people go, oh, that's something I could want to be a part of. I love that. I know you guys do a great job with that stuff too, Jason.
Well, I think people come into church and it's a very serious thing, and that's fine. There is obviously it's a serious thing, but it also can be a really fun thing too. Like, hey,
we ought to enjoy each other's company. I mean,
man, it was so great being here, worshiping and being with all of you. So I think that's a good one.
Yeah.
So I always say, take the gospel very seriously. Don't take yourself too seriously. That's really, I think, a good mantra. All right. Number 6, share stories of life change. So people come back because they see themselves in the story. So stories of life change that are consistently communicated. And I got to say right now, this is an area that we need to get better.
Yeah.
We don't do this enough. We've had fits and starts because the big thing we're trying to do is we do have a large church, and we're trying to figure out how do we do it in a concise way. We're just not in a situation where we could comfortably hand somebody a microphone and tell their story.
Right.
We need to know how long it's going to take because we're so time crunched with our Sunday morning. So really, it's got to be video. And that takes resources and planning and prep to get people's stories, have them video, do any sort of editing or post-production that you need to do, and then insert them. So it's just, when you're running real hard, that's a hard thing to pull off.
Well, and I would just say it's really important though, right? Here's the impact in a real person's life. We had one, I think it was in the fall, and it was a Q&A that I had written out. And so one of the things that I've tried to do is, we actually write out what we're going to say. It was intended to be 5 minutes. It was 17, Jason, because we handed a microphone over, and it was really compelling. It was really powerful. It was really good. But tell that to the preschool Sunday school volunteer. Okay.
Exactly.
So, and so it was one of those things where we said, hey, okay, we're going to have to make some adjustments here to ensure that we don't find ourselves in that position again, not because it wasn't a powerful, impactful story. So we actually have kind of moved to a more video-based thing where there can be a longer version of it, even if that needs that space, but then kind of tighter version for it in our service where we still get to communicate the heart of the story, but there's a little more control, for lack of a better word.
Yeah. No, that's good. And I do think there's a little bit, not that you're quality controlling people's stories, but some people will sort of take a long time to get there, right? So you just maybe need a little bit.
You want to at least rehearse it or have them write it out or things like that to kind of have thought it through. And I think the struggle for us is to create a pipeline for that. Like, where do we go to make sure we're finding those stories and bringing them to the front, and then building them into the rhythm of our life. So second and fourth Sundays now are opportunities for people, either stories of life impact or highlighting ministries. And so we just built it into our calendar.
I love that. I wonder too, I'm just thinking about this off the top of my head, but I wonder if something would work sort of like they do at conferences where they have kind of like a camera set up. And if you have something to say during this time, come in, we'll record you. And I wonder if there should be more of that just with folks in the pews, just little sound bites, like,
come give us a story. Tell us a way that God's been at work in your life or in your family.
Yeah, or just this week, or
I love it.
I wonder if there's a way that we can. I'm gonna write a note to myself right now.
I like it. And then you experiment with it and tell us how it went, and then we'll try it.
Yeah,
I think that's good.
So okay, And the other thing is too, whenever we have a baptism, we get tons of baptism requests, like a believer's baptism, not necessarily an infant baptism, but we get tons of requests for people who's like, oh, I want to get baptized, or it's really neat. And that's because they see themselves in
that's
it.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Number 7, I just laughed at this because it's something that my kids say. And so I intentionally use Gen Z language. There are no icks. That's why they come back. They don't feel the ick. So, in other words, there's no obvious red flags when they come to church. And what do I mean? Kind of things we talked about: over greeting, asking somebody the first time you meet them if they want to come on a retreat. You know, it's like, we don't know each other. Do you want to get engaged? It's sort of like my brother-in-law. Oh my gosh, yeah. So my brother-in-law, when Karen and I were just starting to date, and I was visiting her, we were long distance. So I was in California, and my now brother-in-law's girlfriend welcomed me to the house as if she owned the house, and she says, "Welcome to the family." And we've been joking about it ever since, that poor girl, but just like she wasn't part of the family. She said, "Welcome to the family." That's right. It was like too much. And it was kind of like, it was the wrong level. And it was kind of coming from, I don't even know you. That's what that feels like sometimes when you come into church and people talk about being a family and sort of treat you like family on the first day, or you drop your, I mean, how many stories are there? People go to drop their kids off at the Sunday school, and it's just, the optics are horrible. Like there's no adult. There's like a teenager trying to handle 15 babies. Right. And, you're just sort of wondering, like, maybe we're not going to do that, leave our kid. Stuff like that. Like just making sure there's no obvious red flags. Yeah.
And people are gracious. It's not going to be perfect. You're going to tell a dad joke that doesn't land, and that's life. But if the predominant takeaway was, oh, they were thoughtful, they really kind of had their act together in most respects, and nobody's expecting perfection, but you want to avoid those, kind of those, I don't know, catastrophic errors that are kind of preventable icks, as your kids call it. I like it.
Yeah. They're so funny. They always bring me up to speed on their slang. Okay. Number 8. And this one we've seen over and over again. Why do guests come back? Is your next gen or children's ministry is outstanding.
Yeah.
Honestly, people will tolerate mediocre worship if the kids ministry is awesome. Mm-hmm. Because so many, I mean, think about, we won't go to this long tangent, but I'm just thinking about like youth sports culture. Why is that so much more compelling for parents? Because they're trying to give their kids an experience that they think are going to help them down the road in whatever. Maybe it's to do with sportsmanship or working as a team, or they think it's going to help them get into college somehow. That's often the case, and you hate to break it to them. Your kid's probably not a D1 athlete, but what happened? But if they think it's worthwhile, it's important for the kids, they'll come.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, especially with teenagers, we see teenagers from our area will start going to youth group, and they'll end up bringing their parents to church.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. If that is rocking and rolling, it covers a multitude of sins. It really does.
Yeah. Yeah, and some mediocre sermons and some other kinds of things, right? So, we did our youth event for Easter. It's called Scrambled. It's a nighttime Easter egg hunt all over the church campus. Super cool. And we had our best attended. I mean, it was like more kids than we could handle, really, but it was like 3,000 Easter eggs. Anyway, but a handful of them showed up the next morning with their families, and these are not church families, but kids who've gotten involved. And so it's awesome. It's a mission of the church out into our community. So
it really is.
Do it. Yeah.
And also, I'll put it this way: if a child has a bad experience, the parents are never coming back.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Most likely.
Yeah.
But we had a similar thing a week before Easter. We did an Easter egg hunt, and it went all through the sanctuary and stuff like. It was just really fun. Cool. And we had a parent report back to us what their kid said to them. The kid said to a parent, "I can't believe we get to have fun at church."
That's awesome.
But they were so delighted that their kid was having such a good time. And again, anything you could do to invest in your next gen ministry, if it's between, we got to fund our women's circles that have been around since the 50s, or we're going to fund our next gen ministry, please pick the next gen ministry. Not that the other one doesn't matter, but we've got to invest in the next generation.
That's right. And it doesn't mean it has to be huge either.
No.
A meaningful investment to create a meaningful experience, whether it's 5 kids or 50 kids or whatever, you can create an awesome environment. So that's going to make a difference for guests for sure.
Yeah. I think I'm going to get in trouble for that comment I just made. But all right, number nine. They see that your church is making a difference. So your church's involvement with local mission, opportunities to help. What's the spirit? You know, when you go into a place that's really like off the charts consistent, like a Disney theme park or something like that. I mean, the whole vibe of the place hits you instantly. And you really get a sense of what they're about. If they come into your church and see and get a sense that your church is making a difference in the world, that is so compelling. We know this is especially compelling, always has been for millennials. And millennials are the parents of your young families now. So a great way to rope them in is purpose. So that we are out there. We're doing this. We're fulfilling purpose. And will you join us in this mission? It's so compelling.
Yeah.
Even the folks who are on the fence of what they believe about Jesus will likely jump the fence just to participate in these things.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And then last but not least, and this has me to do with youth sports culture, and this might be the one that really gets me into trouble, but I'm going to say it.
Okay.
People come back because they felt it was worth their time.
Yes.
I know there are a lot of landmines in that statement. Here's what I mean. I believe at the heart of the infrequency of church attendance, even by most committed people, is that on some level, they feel it is not worth their time as much as these other pursuits are. And I think the only way to change that is to do all the other 9 things. Right?
Yeah.
I think the reason they pick sports over church is because they think the immediacy of what that's going to do for their family is more worth their time.
Yeah.
Should they feel like that? Of course not. And I think if you were to corner them, they wouldn't ever admit that or even consciously think that, but they're choosing with how they spend their time.
That's right. And I think there's our values drive our behavior. There's aspirational values and there's actual values. And I think the aspirational values probably for a lot of families would line up with a church attendance and active involvement, but the actual life they're living and the complexity of the decisions they have to make and stuff like that, like it really has to meet them where they are in a way that helps them in some way, or it speaks into their life in some way. And you know, so I don't, you know, I know that's a sticky wicket comment a little bit, because of course we should be choosing our faith and we should be choosing God over all the other things. But how do we help people succeed in a world that asks for a decision about a lot of different kinds of things? So let us set them up for success by being compelling in what we're doing and what the Lord's leading us to present and to offer to them.
Yeah. So pastors, I hope this is helpful. And I think the idea of this list is that as we go through each one, that the Lord will spark one of those that sort of resonates or gets you thinking, oh, you know what? We should think about that. Like for me, obviously it was the telling faith stories. I feel like as we were talking, I'm like, well, wait a minute, I have this idea. Hopefully that's really the intent of this, to do a list like this. But again, the whole point is we want all of our churches to succeed. We want us to flourish and to have a greater impact for the kingdom. And if this can help you get there in any way, man, that is absolutely thrilling for us. So thanks so much for listening. Any final thoughts here before we sign off for today?
No, just good job making it through the Easter stretch, everybody. Hope it went really well. I mean, we had a fantastic time, and also I'm ready for a nap. You know,
Exactly.
we all get that. So hope that went well. And again, we're recording this in the days just following Easter and sharing it later, but we're really hopeful for the good things that God is doing in your lives, in your midst, and keep it up. Do it. It's worth it.
Yeah. And before we sign off, I just want to say I'm excited about, we got some irons in the fire with some interviews coming up.
Yeah.
We got a small church pastor that effectively tripled, maybe quadrupled his church. He had 6 people in it. And he's now they're getting like 100. I don't know what they got in Easter, but I'm excited to find out. He's going to be here in a couple of weeks.
Cool.
Actually have a couple of young adults that we're going to just kind of pick their brains about what the church, kind of what they're looking for and how the church can help them in their life. We got another couple guys that we're going to get on here too. So very excited about some upcoming interviews this spring, and hope you'll be along for the journey with us. And as always, if this is helpful for you, I encourage you to share it, leave a comment for us, a review. That would be really great. Helps to get us seen. And until next time, as we always say, ministry is hard. It is so much better when we do it together. Take care, everyone.